نتوقف مع الحلقة الأولى بعنوان المرأة في عالم المفاوضات واتفاقيات السلام والدبلوماسية الرفيعة المستوى Women in Negotiations, Peace Deals and High-Level Diplomacy. وندعو إلى المنصة كل من Her Excellency Angelina Eichhorst, Deputy Managing Director Europe and Central Asia, Director Western Europe, Western Balkans and Turkey at the European External Action Service, former head of EU delegation to Lebanon, Netherlands. Karma Ekmekji, International Affairs and Relations Advisor to the President of the Council of Ministers, Lebanon. Her Excellency Rend el-Rahim Franke, former Iraq Ambassador to the US, founder, President of the Iraq Foundation in Washington, D.C., US, Iraq. Her Excellency Nabila Makram, Minister of State for Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, Egypt. يحاورهن سعادة السفير كريس رامبلينغ سفير المملكة المتحدة إلى لبنان. تفضلوا.
Good morning, everyone. So may I just start a couple of words at the beginning by thanking Dr. May for bringing us all together and the Foundation. She leads and the Foundation leads such wonderful conferences, and it's great to see in this venue a large number of people here, the kind of quality, and I'll say a bit about that in a second, but the kind of quality of people that you attract, Dr. May, and I'm sure that the day is going to be extremely valuable for all of us. So thank you very much. It's an enormous privilege to have been asked to moderate this panel. I'm going to say a bit about each of the four distinguished panelists in a second, but also when we come following Her Excellency Elizabeth Guigou and talking in particular about the whole pitch, but you know, some of the things that resonated with me are around the importance of education and also tackling violence. Those are things that obviously are important to all of us, but are certainly also important to the UK government. But it's a very inspirational talk to hear. Before I do the introductions, just a couple of anecdotes from my side, and then obviously we all want to hear what the four distinguished panelists have to say. The first is that it feels to me, in my 20 years as a diplomat, I think we have made good progress in the presence of women in senior negotiations and in the numbers of senior women. In the Foreign Office now we have 54 heads of mission who are women. About half of our heads of mission and our ambassadors in Europe are women. We have our first ever female permanent representative in New York to the UN. That's important progress. But I haven't had a boss who was a woman since 2000. 54 heads of mission is only about a third of British ambassadors around the world. Angelina and I used to share this pleasure in the EU's Political and Security Committee that I used to sit in. Only I think 4 of the 28 are currently women. So there's a lot of progress still to be made, and to explore the success and also the progress we have with us, they've already been introduced, but Her Excellency Angelina Eichhorst, who, great friend, we worked together for the last 4 years in Brussels, as well as currently working in the European External Action Service. She has also obviously been ambassador here and has worked in Somalia, Egypt and New York. So some pretty tough places. I'm sure New York was the most difficult of all of those. Karma Ekmekji, so as well as we have heard, as working with the Prime Minister, she's founded the Diplo Women concept and has partnered with the Foundation for Opportunity run by one of my predecessors to develop that platform. And is also involved in the non-public sector, so as the co-founder and member of the advisory board of 3QA, a London-based enterprise aimed at creating a sustainable ecosystem for the third sector. You can talk to her afterwards, I'm sure, if she's interested. Her Excellency Rend el-Rahim, who as well as having been the ambassador in the United States, is also co-founder and president of the Iraq Foundation, very active in civil society, I know, and in promoting human rights. And also I think you have a background as a banker and a currency trader, so that may be slightly useful for many of us. And then finally, Her Excellency, certainly not least, Her Excellency Nabila Makram, Minister of State in Egypt, and I think you also have a very distinguished diplomatic career, Italy, Chicago, Dubai, various other places. So that's enough from me. You want to hear from these four. Angelina, maybe we'll start with you. Would you like to both share some of your experience, but I know from what we've been talking about over the last 4 years, you've been involved in some extremely difficult negotiations. How has your gender played in, and what practical steps and recommendations might you have?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much, May, for bringing us all here, really. I'm so thrilled to be back. It's absolutely great. But also through your inspiration. I was sitting in this audience quite often. I think every year I came to your conferences, always hoping to find a good source of inspiration, a quote, a suggestion, a practical step, and I always left with new ideas. I hope today also we can inject new ideas into the audience. Always happy to see as many men as women. I just see half-half. It's not half-half, but I do see it half-half. Very, very important. As Elizabeth said it, Madame la Ministre, you have said it very, very clearly. In a way, I have always been the one advocating quota, because I just feel, and I still feel until today, despite the success we've had, it is too slow. And we cannot wait until 2234 until the world is gender equal. We cannot. And I'm quoting a year that is quoted in a report from the, and I really advise you all to read it. It's the World Economic Forum, the yearly gender gap report, the global gender gap report. It's huge. It's full of data. We all know them. But it's such an eye-opener to see how long it really will take before we get there, for all the reasons Madame la Minister, she mentioned, and all of you did. And yes, I acknowledge the support, and I greatly, greatly compliment Prime Minister Saad Hariri for putting the 4 key superwomen up front to be there as minister. You know, I show you a photo. I show it in Brussels. You know, you have this beautiful, the 4 of you lined up, and I say, do you know who these women are? And honestly, too few know, because they cannot actually perceive even that there are 4 ministers in the government in Lebanon today. So I'm promoting as much as possible. You are not movie stars, you are ministers doing extremely difficult work, hard work. And this is perhaps what I would say is one of the key elements I could think we join when we all feel so strongly about the half-half. It's the readiness to do the hard work. It's the readiness to take responsibility. You know, in our kind of job, what I do today, but I also, when I was ambassador here in Lebanon, it's 24/7. It never stops. And obviously you have to be willing to do that. But we may always want to do it a little bit extra to show that we are actually really good at these issues. I want to get out of this narrative. I want to get out of this idea that women are better negotiators than men, or that women are better managers than men. I don't believe this is the right approach. What the problem is, there are not enough women in these positions. That is the key issue, and that is where we need to focus, particularly politically. Now you have 4 women out of 30 ministers. We have globally, we have 20 or 21 heads of states and government who are women. It's not enough. We know all of that, but what do we do about getting there? And then we can mention so many figures. I mean, my management in Brussels, so to say, the Council of Ministers, we call it the college, 28 men and women, out of them 9. Okay, you can always say this is a step ahead. No, it's not, as long as it's not half-half. So how do we get there? Again, I do believe, Elizabeth, we need quota to get there, because I don't think, how else can we do it? But the quota could just be 50-50. If that is then what it needs to be done, I used to go around in Lebanon. I remember when the last elections, not these elections, I wasn't here. You remember this very well. This is what I used to tell you when I asked leaders of party leaders, why don't you put more women on your list? And the standard reply was, we will not get the votes if we put the women. I mean, I'm sorry, this cannot be any longer the perception. It may be the perception, but then let us change it and let us work on that. So just one part is we need to move faster. The second is let us work on the new normal. It should be the new normal completely, that we are there wherever we are, and where we are, we have to speak up. And here I'm asking Minister May Shidiak. I cannot ask you, May, I cannot ask you how do you work in the Council of Ministers, because this is top secret. But I do hope that the women in the Council of Ministers speak up, make the points, because we have plenty of studies that say wherever there are official meetings, the man in the room speaks 3 times the women. And very often, you know, it's the he-peating. I don't know if you know this term. He repeats what she has been saying already 3 times, but nobody really listens. And then he comes in and he says it. Fine, okay. The point is, we actually need to work on making this not a normal issue, and the normal issue is the woman makes the point, gets listened to, and we turn the page next. I could talk to you for hours about my work as negotiating, facilitating. I do a lot of real difficult work between Belgrade and Pristina, peace talks, dialogue. It's hard, it's good. I think one quality we all need to have for this is patience. Patience, a lot of patience, and listening. Not just always wanting to be the one who speaks, but, you know, and not just look up and down, but also left and right and backwards and forwards, and just keep that whole holistic view of the issues. We can say women are good at that. I really don't know that. I just don't have the figures, but I do believe that this is the key of the work we have to do. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Angelina. Yes, I mean, kind of that message about normalization is such a key one, and I'm sure that will be picked up a little bit in questions too. Karma, what's your sense of this? And in particular, through Diplo Women, what are you picking up, not only from what we think and how we might normalize, but also what other women out there are feeling?
Well, I think I'm going to pick up exactly where Angelina left off. There just simply aren't enough women in these positions. We see a lot of women starting to emerge in grassroots conflict resolutions in communities and in different local spaces, but we don't see enough in international affairs. And just a small statistic, 60% of Security Council affairs are on conflict-ridden areas. And we cannot have one thematic event on women a year. Therefore, women should be completely integrated in all these dossiers, because the world, the Security Council, is in fact dealing with issues that are way beyond gender. They're affecting communities, health, education, global education, children, and therefore women, we cannot just add them to the mix and expect something to come out at the end and just say, yes, we need to include more women. We need to take things to the next level. We need to leverage all these existing women networks that are trying to be, to work, lobby on having more women in peace and security. And this is in fact a little bit why I spent a lot of time thinking about developing this digital and physical platform, which is called Diplo Women, to tackle exactly those issues. We know the problem. The problem is that we don't have enough women. Now, how do we get to point A, from point A to point B? We need more mentorship. We need more training. We need to explain to women that diplomacy today has a broader definition. With all due respect to all the ambassadors, women ambassadors who have marched up their career path and become ambassadors, today diplomacy is broader than that. And we need to accept that and say there are women who are doing research in foreign policy, advising governments on foreign policy. For me, these are also diplowomen. They're not only the ambassadors, facilitators, negotiators, mediators, trainers, are all as well considered to be women who can have an effective and present role in peace and security, nation building and peace building. There are a lot of, people say, what's the criteria? Give me the criteria for women to be in peace and security or in negotiation or in high-level diplomacy. Well, first of all, I'm not one to set parameters, and I'm not one to preach on who is legitimate or who is eligible or who isn't. But from my work, I have concluded that there are 5 criteria or attributes that we need to educate women on, build capacity on, for women to be able to participate in such talks. The first is that a woman requires to have a network. She needs to be able to have that connectivity. The second is a track record, and a solid track record in working with different stakeholders. And when I say track record, I mean not commitment. I don't commit to do this and that, because commitment needs to be translated. So we need to look at the track records and not the language or the word. The third is confidence. I speak to a lot of students. I teach at university in international affairs, and a lot of girls come up to me and say, this is a man's world. It's a field that my father doesn't want me to get into. He thinks that I will lose my life if I work in this field. It's something that's going to keep me away from other issues, from other social responsibilities that I have to take. And here I tell them, you just have to be confident. If this is what you want, tashi, in Arabic we have a word, tashi. Go for it. Don't stop, just go for it. Do what you believe in. And if it's in your heart and if it's in your mind, it will happen. And finally, it's how do we translate all of this to currency? And by currency, I don't mean monetary currency, I mean electoral currency, I mean success on the ground in negotiations, something to show for, success in nation building. So these are, for me, at least, what I've concluded on what we can educate, capacity build, increase efforts on how we can help women move from point A to point B. And the Diplo Women platform aims at doing that. I just have a final thought, and you said you have 53 women ambassadors. I pride myself that I come from a country where we have 21 women ambassadors. These are, this is a number that surpasses some European countries. 17 of them are posted abroad in missions. 4 of them are here at the ministry. I really think they are incredible women who have sacrificed, given a lot of their time, their energy, to become the face of Lebanon in different countries. And I really am extremely proud of these Diplo women. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karma. That question in particular around the breadth, diplomacy isn't just about being an ambassador. It's very much about having people in all sorts of, and everyone is a diplomat in their own ways, in the way that they operate. And maybe that's something too, Excellency Rend el-Rahim, former Iraqi ambassador to the United States, we can explore also through your conversation, not least because obviously you are very active in the civil society space. So again, what are your reflections? How do we encourage more women to, in Karma's words, go for it?
Thank you very much, Chris. Let me thank Minister Meshadia for organizing this and the UN Women. Okay, thanks, Chris. And thank you, Minister Meshadia, for providing exceptional leadership and mentorship for women. You really are outstanding. Thank you. I've always been in fields that are male-dominated. I started my life a long time ago as a banker in the Middle East, and I was surrounded by men. I was often the only banker at a meeting of bankers, only woman banker at a meeting of bankers. But in fact, the realization of what a challenge it was to be a woman in a man's world really only came when I went to Washington to serve as Iraq's ambassador to the US in late 2003, simply because it was a much more high-profile position, and therefore it was much more sensitive, and the reflection of who I was as a woman was much more relevant and much more at stake, if you want. The situation was very conflicted, and Iraq was in a post-conflict era after 2003. The political situation in Iraq was very divided. The situation in Washington, D.C. was very divided. Not everybody approved of the war. And the government in Iraq was in a state of formation. It was a fledgling government. It's not as if we had policies and talking points on every single issue that an ambassador can actually use. And I was the first Iraqi ambassador anywhere in the post-2003 era, and the first woman ambassador from Iraq ever. So it was a very peculiar situation. Now, fortunately, I was very familiar with Washington, and I think that was why I was posted. I knew my way around the city and the, as they call them, the corridors of power. Nevertheless, it really landed me in a situation where there were men all around me. There were very few, even European ambassadors in Washington at that time. Now it's very different. But in that era, I think there were only about 2 or 3 women ambassadors out of a whole host. Not a single other Arab ambassador in Washington. And somebody spoke about networks. The possibility of creating a network, a mentorship that could actually help me along was non-existent. I felt myself very much challenged because Iraq was in the news every day. You opened any newspaper, you didn't even have to open the newspaper. It was on the front pages. And most of the time it was bad news. News that one didn't want to hear. Certainly news about an insurgency, news about economic decay, and so on and so forth. And therefore, I was in the spotlight for 2 very good reasons. One of them is because Iraq was in the spotlight. But because I was a woman, was under intense scrutiny. And I felt that much more than I have felt it in any other job. Both in Iraq and in the United States, I felt that because I was a woman, I could not go wrong. Everybody was watching to ensure, watching me to fail, watching me to trip up. I had to have more command of facts and figures than if I had been a male ambassador. I had to be more forceful in the way I presented issues because I was a woman and I couldn't afford to be regarded as weak. At the same time, I had to be cautious and circumspect because there were minefields in Iraq and minefields in Washington. Because Iraq was very much in the news, I was on the media every day. And the questioning was not always friendly. It was often hostile. And in the absence of set policies, a well-formed Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Baghdad, talking points, policies, and so on, very often I had to wing it. I didn't have time to actually go back to Baghdad and say, okay, I'm going on CNN in 2 hours' time. What should I say if they ask about this or they ask about that? There wasn't the time. This was a very exciting time, but a very trying time. And one of the issues that I found very difficult was, and I'm sorry to say this, was in dealing with Arab ambassadors in Washington. I apologize if there are Arab ambassadors here. Of course, they were all male at the time. The Iraqi issue was by no means something that they all agreed on. It was very controversial. And we had monthly meetings of the ambassadors of the Arab League. And I found it very difficult. First of all, they didn't really accommodate themselves to the fact that I was a woman. And in a sense, I was constantly being tested, both because I was a woman and because I was representing a regime, if you want, or a government that emerged out of Western war and Western occupation. I don't think I was better than any other man could have been. But I think I had to work much harder at being good, and I had to work much harder at persuading everybody in Washington that to be acceptable, to be credible. I want to quote something that Madeleine Albright said. She said that women make better diplomats because they have peripheral vision. Now, I think by peripheral vision, she means that women do not see negotiation, diplomacy, peace building as a zero-sum game, and that they can look at the whole of society when they are negotiating. They can look at communities, they can look at women, they can look at children, they can look at the girls and so on. So it's not a struggle between powers. It's a struggle to make peace for communities. This is how I understand it. And I do believe that women can bring that to the table. Women diplomats can bring a broader vision to peacemaking, to negotiation in their role of diplomats and ambassadors or any kind of negotiators. And I want to pick up here, if I have a minute, Chris, to talk about not high-level negotiation. I want to talk about low-level negotiation. Our region, in many countries, is a post-conflict region. If we look at Iraq, Syria is still in conflict, Yemen is still in conflict, Libya, a whole lot of other countries. And yet, peace talks and peace negotiations always happen among men. I find this, first of all, I don't understand it. Secondly, I find it execrable because 50% of the population that has a very clear point of view and a very different point of view is not included. In Iraq, we have been trying, and this is the Iraq Foundation, by the way, we have been trying very hard to include women in peace talks in their communities. Not just at the national level, not just at the level of ministers and MPs and so on, but really within communities. In other words, with the clerics, among the tribes, with their neighbors and so on. We call these women, and we're training them, we call them ambassadors. They are ambassadors for peace building within their communities. And I think this is something that I know UN Women is interested in this topic. I really do urge all countries that are emerging from conflict to ensure that, if we're talking about the 50%, that 50% of negotiators, whether at the national level or at the local level, are women, because they are the most affected by conflict. And they reap the benefits of peace. And they have a much broader, this peripheral vision, that Madeleine Albright talked about. In our experience, women in communities who negotiate peace agreements between conflicting parties definitely bring in this peripheral vision, and therefore they are more successful. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I mean, some extremely powerful messages there, not least on the perception that women have to work harder to kind of deliver, and also starting to unpack the cultural challenges, but this final thing about how we structure negotiations and how ministries and others structure them. Your Excellency, we come to you last, but you're also sitting in a ministerial position at the moment. So what's your reflection? What lessons have you got? And particularly, obviously, from what you heard, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, my dear minister, colleague, and friend. It's a pleasure to be back, and it's not my first time to take part of one of your forum. The last one was in Jordan. I really enjoyed it, and actually knowing the experiences and the thought of other distinguished females, either ambassadors, females, this really gives me a great positive energy. Yes, we are in the tunnel, but there is always a light. And I always come back with these forums with a great positive energy that really gives me more backing and more hope to achieve what we have to do, especially in our countries and especially in the time when our country needs the women to take part. And this is now, unfortunately, and I'm sorry to say that with the presence of all men in the room, it is the women's world now. Let me talk about my experience. I'm the first Minister of Immigration and Egyptian expats. My story is a little bit different because I started a ministry that was cancelled 20 years ago. So I didn't have any files, I didn't have any experiences I should go beyond that. I had to start from zero. And being a woman, a minister for Egyptian expats wasn't that easy because I'm dealing with several kind of categories in Egyptian abroad. I'm talking, when I'm talking to the Gulf, with the Egyptian expats living in the Gulf, it's not like I'm talking to Egyptians in Australia or in Canada or even in the States or even in Europe with the illegal immigrants. So I have to change my chapeau every now and then when I talk to people. And being a woman, I have to be patient and I have to absorb all the anger because, as you know, immigrants sometimes are very frustrated and they have this kind of anger. They need so many stuff to be delivered, and they just find me, only me, in front of them. So talking about the country, talking about the challenges the country is facing, talking about how could we work together, the expats and the country, for the sake of Egypt, wasn't that easy. And as I said, to start a new ministry, even I didn't have a logo for my ministry. I didn't have anything. But now, I mean, after the decision of our president in September 2015 to return that ministry back to life and back to the Egyptian government, it was 3.5 years so far being a minister of Egyptian expats. I can tell you so many challenges I faced. Being a woman in that field wasn't that easy because I have to deal with other ministers at the government. So I am the new member, a very, very new member who wants to deliver. I am part of the defense, part of the health, part of the education, part of anything, you name it. And I have to work. So the women, with all my respect to the men, the women are more intelligent. They know how to take things very easily. But with a full respect for their colleagues. And being an ex-diplomat, that helped me a lot because you're dealing in things very tough, but in a very diplomatic way to get what you want. So, for instance, if we have a problem in Kuwait with Egyptian laborers in Kuwait, I have to go first to my colleague, the Egyptian Minister of Labor, and I tell him that, okay, we are one team, and I'm going anyway, so if you need anything, I could deliver. And he respects that I am giving him his prestige. This is how women think, because we work with our emotions, and our emotions are really giving us the back that we need in every single thing we do, or even we say. People believe the women have this kind of sincerity in talking, and we do not actually give up. We always have this strength to carry on the mission we have to accomplish. In Egypt, we are 8 ministers, and I congratulate Lebanon for having 4 ministers, female ministers. In Egypt, we are 8 at the cabinet, and we're not there for, having an image of a woman inside the government. Each one of the 8 is handling a very big, heavy file, from investment to Egyptian expat, to solidarity, to health, to tourism, you name it, environment, everything. But this comes from the belief of the Egyptian leadership that women can. And this is why we have this slogan in Egypt by Dr. Maya Morsi, who is the head of the Women Council. She had this slogan called Teh Marbuta. I don't know how to translate Teh Marbuta, they don't have it. The Teh Marbuta is us, the female kind of slogan. The Teh Marbuta, that means that you should be very proud of yourself being a woman, that you can achieve and you can accomplish. This Teh Marbuta slogan was everywhere in Egypt. And women in Egypt start to, have their trust in themselves to show what they can do. I was an ex-diplomat, and I know exactly how women diplomats in the Middle East can suffer. It's not easy, it's very tough. And with our tradition and with our culture, it's not easy that an ambassador woman can decide to take her husband and her kids and to move on from a country to another. This is not easy. But the woman, as I said, the woman diplomat and the woman in general, she's very intelligent. Yes, she works, she become an ambassador, she become a consul general, but she respects the man in the house. She knows there are limits, and she knows how to balance between her work life and her family life. She takes care of her kids, of her house, she goes to the parent-teacher conference, she goes to the Christmas carols, she goes everywhere. But at the same time, you see a very well-represented ambassadors, females in the Middle East. But being an ambassador, it's not only a profession, it is a lifestyle. You can be a diplomat, you can be an ambassador, even if you're not working at the diplomatic corps. And this is a great mission that the women, the Arab women, should take a lead, because, and we have to admit, our image in the Western world is a bit different. When I was posted in Chicago, they always ask me, oh, do you ride still camels beside the pyramid? And I said, what camels? I mean, what are you talking about? They have really such frustrated ideas about us, about women. They always think that women, the Arab women, they just sit in the house, they just raise the kids, take care of the house, and that's it. So we need the women to take part in promoting the Arab woman force, and actually they are also the key to give another positive image about how female Arab women should be. So, being the Egyptian Minister for Expat, I always back the woman living abroad, because, as I said, she's the one handling the house, backing the husband who's working abroad, and in the same time, she's raising the kids on our religion, our tradition, our culture, and our patriotic, because kids living abroad, they know nothing about our country. And this is, I'm sure everybody, I mean, all the immigrants everywhere, they suffer the same. So you see the role of the woman, it's not only being an ambassador or being a minister, it's even the woman at home. She had a big role, and as we are officials, we need to back these women as much as we can. Abroad, they lose the Arabic language, unfortunately. And they started to, speak French and English, with all my respect, but we have our national idea. Our national idea is very important. This is why at the Ministry of Immigration, we did an initiative called اتكلم مصري, talk Egyptian. Talk Egyptian because you are implementing the Egyptian identity inside the kids. Talking in English, talking in French, it's a plus. But you have your own language that you should be proud of, and you should be engaged to this language and to your country. So to conclude what I need to say, I don't want to take more of my time. I respect women being in key jobs, ministers, ambassadors, businesswomen, you name it. But I also respect the woman in the house, because the family is also the core of the Arab society, and this is how we protect our culture and our heritage as well. We, as women, we have a lot to do, a lot to achieve. We do not lose hope. We're still going and going and going. Yes, it's not that, we didn't reach that far, but we are moving. And having all these women ministers in the Arab world right now, I've been to Emirates, to Kuwait, to Jordan, and I have seen so many examples and so many beautiful icons. We're not only the image, but we are really key people that could make the change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you to all the panel for some very stimulating and I think quite powerful interventions to kick us off. I think we're going to have around 10 minutes or so for questions. So what I suggest, we've already got one over there, what I suggest is that we take maybe 3 and we'll have a go across the panel to answer those, and hopefully we'll have time for a couple of rounds. Do we have a microphone? I think there's a first question here, a second one just behind, and then a third one just here in the front.
شكرا مي، وألف مبروك ليك ولكل زميلاتك معالي الوزيرات. لست مربوطة، اسمي فريدة العلاقي وأنا من ليبيا، وأعتذر أنني سأتحدث بالإنجليزية لأن ما عندهمش translation.
We cannot hear you.
My name, yes, I'm talking now. My name is Farida Allagi. I'm from Libya. I happen to be the Libyan ambassador to the European Union, but it took me only. I was appointed January 2015. I resigned June 2016 for many reasons. I didn't want to spend my time in that big bureaucracy, in that big hypocrisy, in that big political mess. I felt I better leave because I also was not happy also with what was happening in Libya. So between the EU and between Libya, I resigned. Let me point the following. Our colleague from the UN Women, I have to, like somebody have said, believe me, we in Libya today, away from any political circle or table or negotiation or 1325 or, particularly if you are smart, if you are courageous, if you are not looking for a political position, if you are speaking your mind, you are out of all these circles. 99% of what's going on in Libya And that's why we are in the mess, led by men. Even when we have all these political conferences all over the globe, every week, every month, Libya, the failed state, Libya, the solution, and they lead us from one mess to the other. So, UN Women, they are, and the UN SMIL, and the UNDP, all these young women, Libyan women, they are all the time in training courses. 1325, women's empowerment, political women, emancipation. They go back and then nobody calls on them. Nobody includes them. Nobody listens to them. So this is a reality. We have to say it, and we hope that the women at the EU, I was, our colleague from Iraq said her Arab ambassador. The contrary, when I was at the EU, all my friends, the Arab ambassador, were so happy with me because I was really the activist. I was not the ambassador. I was all the time speaking my mind, speaking the truth. I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I'm not dying to have a position. And to conclude, we have another dilemma. Here we are today, for example, in Libya. We have corruption, we have wrong governments, we have tribes, we have militias. So many women, like me or others, who are offered positions, political positions to be minister, we refuse. How we can be part of corruption, of ugly politics, of international intervention? How we can be? So it's not a matter that many women, of course, few women, we have few women ministers, with all my respect to them. They bring these women, like when they go to Palermo or Paris, or like decorative pieces. Poor women, they just go there, either they stay outside, they are not part of the negotiation. So this is the reality, and we do hope that the women in the international community, they have to help us to really push for that, push for this reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was a lady just behind you. Yeah. The young lady just behind you.
Good morning. My name is Ghia Al-Assad, and I'm currently still an undergraduate in political science and international affairs. And seeing all these women activists and women leaders gives me so much to look forward to in my career in the future. And anyone in my place, and any young lady in my place would say that a dream is to become a diplowoman. So my question for you, as active women in diplomacy for a long time now, how can we be women on the front lines in the face of patriarchal stereotypes and patriarchal ways of dealing with things in the face of those who have these stereotypes? Because as diplomats, we're going to be representing our countries and representing our beliefs in front of very much male-dominated institutions. So from your experience, what would your advice be to us young women? Thank you.
Raghida.
Thank you. I'm Raghida Dargham. I'm founder and executive chairman of Beirut Institute, who spent about 40 years in the United Nations as a senior diplomatic correspondent. So I know diplomacy, and I know the shortcomings. But before I say anything about that, I want to say, may you prove that we can go across from being journalists to being policymakers, whether we are diplomats or not. So thank you for making an example of that. I just want to I want to point out to you that we actually, Rend, we need a systematic ask. We do not have a systematic ask. Amongst all the envoys of the United Nations to places of conflict for over the years, we have hardly had a woman. Maybe we were discussing that we had one woman with whom we're not so sure if she was really an envoy or not, a mediator or not. And I think we have to have the systematic ask on insisting that women are envoys to places of conflict and for conflict resolution. So I think we should really have a policy, and we have to have a strategy on how to do this. And I think it's also important that we do not think of diplomacy only amongst diplomats. With all due respect to diplomats who have a position, for someone who worked the corridors of the United Nations for 40 years, I think I know a bit of diplomacy, and so others do others. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take one or two others, and then we'll have one round up. It's a lady here, and then a lady there. Oh, okay, very good. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll wrap.
Hello, over here. Hi. Very lovely to see you all, ladies. I love the suits, by the way. They're very on point. My name is Talar Demirjan, and I wanted to say that as someone who graduated a few years back, and I received a degree in counterterrorism and security. And over the course of the many years, I've been working in many different projects, you know, gaining your soft skills, as some people say, which I don't think they're soft skills because they're transferable, but also doing trainings. I recently finished one on, as the lady said over here, the 1325 Women in Conflict program in Edinburgh on training on reconciliation and all that stuff. And I come back to Lebanon and I want to find positions or programs that I can contribute to with the things that I've learned, or find positions in which I can grow from. But the sad situation is, as someone who wants to stay in Lebanon or wants to work in Lebanon, there are no positions available in certain levels. They all start at a much higher. And they don't think that the skills that you have in other jobs that you've had are transferable enough. How does one convey to these people that hiring people like us from Lebanon who understand the context, who know the people, the language, is a much better payoff than getting people from abroad to do these jobs, because that's what's prevalent around here. Sorry if I'm being... Thank you.
Don't apologize. Don't say sorry. Don't apologize.
And then
Try to stop saying sorry.
and as the microphone is moving from Your Excellency.
Bassem Shab, former member of parliament and the father of 4 daughters.
Can we have the... Please.
It's been a very interesting session indeed. And I think most men do agree with most of what you've said. I think there's a very sensitive issue, which is a cultural issue. We find that in our society, sometimes it's not the men who impede progress, but rather conservative-minded women. And I think your message should be addressed to those as much as it is to men. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an important reflection. And then finally, this lady here, and what I might do is go in the reverse order, although the only direct question has probably been asked to Karma, so maybe we should start with her.
Hello. My name is Linda Banjarian. I'm an international affairs political science student. First of all, I want to thank everyone for this very inspirational project. I really am honored to be here. Second of all, it really scares me. I just want to say this emotional distress, just outburst. It really scares me as an international affairs student to be put in a reality where it's scary, actually, that I am graduating soon and I don't know what the next step is. For a lot of male, probably in our generation, it's probably easier now, thanks to all these raidat, let's say, or innovators, women empowerers. But a question I wanted to ask, as the minister there said, I wanted to ask, what is the infrastructure that is capable of moving not just from top to bottom, but also from bottom to top? So not just women in power give inspiration to other women. It's women that are on the floor, that are not part of the bureaucracy, that are not part of power, that are capable of giving inspiration to other women. For example, as he said, like the women that are working in the houses or the mothers and the families. These are the people that we need to target. What is the infrastructure or the projects that need to target them, not just the people that have the opportunities to be in the face of social media or this new upcoming generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now back to the panel. I'm afraid I'm being told we have to be quite brief. So, yeah, Excellency.
Okay, let me start by the advice. Some beliefs that you need to take care of, or just to put it in your mind. First of all, when you have this chair of being a minister, just believe that you will not be a minister for the rest of your life. This post will leave, could be today, but when you are in that post, you should do whatever you need to do, because when you leave, people will remember you with all the achievement you did. Nobody stays in the cabinet or in the government for the rest of his life. So you have to believe in that.
Debatable.
عندكم هنا بيقعدوا؟ احنا ما بنقعدش. And I loved the word what you said, Your Excellency. You said خشي. What did you say? اتحشري. احنا in Egypt we say خشي بدماغك. You know خشي بدماغك دي? Because, okay, you are a woman, you are feminine, you are nice, you are kind, but at a certain limit, you have to make a stand. You have to make a stand with your own belief that no matter what will stop you, nothing will stop you. And just be careless in the meaning of, I believe in what I'm doing and I really don't care. I will give just a small, tiny example. When I became a minister of immigration, the first incident was a problem in Jordan with some workers. And I had to go there because I need to help them. And I went with my jeans and a jacket, and I mean, I'm easygoing. And people there were like looking at me, are you the minister? I really want to work and I want to achieve. I don't really focus on my appearance as much as I'm focusing on what I can do for the benefit of the people. And when you talk to people in your sincere way, as I said, you just do whatever you want to do, اتحشري وخشي بدماغك وما يهمكيش أي حد خالص.
Yes, well, first of all, I endorse that completely. Tashi, tashi. Don't take a no for an answer. But I really want to pick up on two things that were said here. First of all, His Excellency said something, and my friend Rend also. Look, we can legislate. In Iraq, we have, in the constitution, it says 25% of parliament members should be women, which is wonderful, and I'm all in favor. I'm all in favor of quotas. I'm all in favor of legislation. But the 25% women who are in parliament, I can count only a few, maybe 3 or 4, 5, who actually wield influence in parliament and in their own parties. What we need to make legislation truly meaningful is social change, societal change. And as you said, I can tell you horror stories about my work at the Iraq Foundation, where we worked on women's legislation, and how many women fought what we wanted to achieve. We want societal change, and societal change comes slowly, incrementally. And I have to tell you, it comes from the grassroots up. It cannot possibly come from top down. Sure, there can be high-profile women like Her Excellency, Meisha Diak, and others, and so on, people on this panel, who act as mentors, okay, role models and so on. But ultimately, it is the woman who is in the neighborhood, who has a small job, the teacher, the nurse, and so on, the mother, who have to feel that they are empowered as women, and that they have rights, equal rights, as women, qua women, and that they can do and they can achieve. Only when you have that push from underneath will legislation be truly meaningful and effective. This is why I very much want negotiations, both at the high level, at the UN level, to be led by women. We have, you know, all sorts of men. We have Marti Ahtisaari and all sorts of others who lead peace negotiations and what have you. Why don't we see women delegations from the UN brokering peace? This is at the high level. At the lower level, we also need, in peace talks, whether it's in Syria, Libya, Iraq, and so on, we're still a country at war, by the way, we need women at the negotiating, peacemaking table. So I think we need to work on society, bottom up as well as top down. And where they meet is where we succeed.
Come on.
I'm going to go through everything real quickly. First of all, I think we need to change the shape of the table from a two-sided table to a round table so that we can include everyone. Because today, just because a woman doesn't necessarily hold arms in conflict doesn't mean she shouldn't be on the table. That's the equation. So we need to change the shape of the table. To Member of Parliament, ex-Minister Bassem al-Shab, I know exactly what you mean, and it is a horror story. And every time I introduce myself to a lady, to a woman, and I say, hi, I'm an advisor to Prime Minister Hariri, and they start asking me about reproductive health and the nationality and the rape law, and I really know nothing about these issues. I work on the 1701 resolution, Security Council issues, sanctions. I don't know anything about women's issues. So I would like the woman who is speaking to me to change her patriarchal mentality and to accept me as someone who works in politics and doesn't do women issues. I don't know what they are. I'm sorry. Talar, yes, correct? When we raise the funds for Diplo Women and we launch, you apply to Diplo Women, and we'll see what we'll do then. Raghida Dargham, I remember when you were in the corridors of the United Nations, I was there at the same time, looked very high up to you. You were extremely, very meticulous in the way you navigated through these corridors. And I do agree with you, there should be an ask, and the ask should be a continuous lobbying by all these networks, mediator networks for women, and we need to leverage them. Again, that's what we're trying to do, is try to leverage to have that one ask, that Geir Peterson in Syria has women with him when there are peace negotiations, when the Libya envoy, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, there are more women on the table. I wanted to address the issue of frustration. I hear the frustration. It's extremely hard to deal with, but we have to understand one thing. We do not work in a field where we go home at the end of the day, open an Excel sheet and say, today we made $500 or today we lost $300. We work in a field that requires, as Angelina said, extreme patience. And the work we're doing today, we may not reap the rewards for. Maybe our children will feel the impact that we're trying to do today. Maybe our grandchildren will only feel the impact. And so we need to enter these fields with internalizing that in our minds, that this is not a direct reward. We're not going to see the direct rewards, and we need to accept that. We need to accept that it's a frustrating job. And thank you for the compliment on the suits. It's fashion diplomacy, Lebanese designers. Thank you.
Very good. And last but certainly not least, Angelina.
Two quick points. I'm particularly encouraged by the presence of students, graduates out on the market very soon. Our message, you've heard it, it's, what was it? Trocherie? Go. Trocherie. Don't be shy. Really don't be shy. I have so many women who come into my office. They want to apply for an exposition in the organization, and they're always, the first question they ask themselves, can I really do this? And you should see men, how they approach and how they just want to move up in the ladder, what they send, the email they send, the statements they make. You know, there's so much confidence in there. Please just work on that confidence, go out there and don't even question whether it is something you should do or not, just go for it. And I think this is a key message we want to give back to all of you. The very important notion of peace negotiations run by men, this is so true. We all know it is not easy to make war, but war happens too much everywhere, and it's being done, yes, very often male. It is more difficult to make peace. It is extremely difficult work, and it requires that long-term approach, that 24/7 availability, but it requires women to be there. And I just realized again, because we have been investing a lot in getting women at the round table, the rectangular table, for the Syria negotiations, the Yemen negotiations, the Libya negotiations, and it has been a struggle. It's a daily struggle for us as international organizations to push for the women to be there with the negotiators. The UN has moved a lot now with the networks of negotiators and mediators for women as well. Still a lot of way to go. We work with NATO. We have now a lot of more women also in NATO working together. I've mostly had women bosses, so I'm fortunate compared to Chris. But I must say we do have a duty, and that's my last point, as women, to work towards with open up and courage and really be open to help each other. It doesn't always happen, I must say, but I think most of the time we really know how to make the time to pass these messages and to be there out there. So I will surely continue to do that. I also found a lot of inspiration from you in the panel to work ahead, and I hope we have been giving some thoughts and ideas to all. Thanks.
And really, I think you've just, as they say in the British military, just stolen my sandwiches. That was exactly what I was about to say. That I think certainly I've been very inspired by what I've heard. And someone was talking about their daughter. I have a 5-year-old daughter, almost 6. I will be taking back a message to stand tall and to be confident. So thank you in particular to the panel, but also to everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Just such an inspiration to all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. شكرا لجميع المحاضرين. نكمل برنامجنا مع حوار خاص وحصري مع لوسي هوكينج، الصحفية والروائية الإنجليزية، ابنة عالم الفيزياء الشهير ستيفن هوكينج. بتحاورها يمنى نوفل, host and producer of Why Chats.